Well, hello again, everyone, once again, and welcome back to Preterist Apologetics. Right over there is Mike Sullivan. Mike, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Doing
Yeah,
great.
me too, me too. My name is Don Preston, and Mike and I have been having an awful lot of fun producing these videos. Now, I couldn't film this last Friday, so that it could be aired on Saturday. So we're filming this on Sunday night. And I don't know yet if I'm going to try to post it tonight or just wait till in the morning. Mike, what do do you have any thoughts on it? What you prefer?
Uh, Whatever you want to do tonight or tomorrow is fine. I've
Okay.
had a lot of people go, "Where is it? Where is
Yeah.
it?"
Yeah. I have as well,
Probably
by the
the
way.
sooner the better.
Yeah, I understand that. So anyway, depending on time, my wife may have some supper fixed for me so that I might need to get over there and get that immediately afterwards, but I'll do the best that I can. So and I don't know if you can detect it or not, but my voice is really, really weak tonight. I spent 4 days at a major automotive swap meet in Springfield, Missouri, and it's 4 days of constant talking.
Mm,
And I
haggling. Yeah.
haggling and carrying on and having a good time, seeing a bunch of my gearhead buddies, all that kind of stuff, having a good time. Uh, and I'll say this, it was like 85 degrees at Springfield. I'm sitting here looking, and right now here in Ardmore, it's 106. And while I was at Springfield, my wife texted me. She had to go into town and run some errands, and it was 115 degrees.
Whoa.
Yes, indeed. And so I come home from 85 degrees and it's just like running into a wall. It's just
You
like, holy
you
cow, think I'll go back to Springfield.
yeah, you thought it was hot.
Oh, mercy sakes. But anyway, had a great time up there. It's a pretty large swap meet. I struck completely out, didn't buy hardly anything, didn't sell hardly anything.
Mm.
So financially it was kind of a bust, but nonetheless had a good time, seeing a lot of my friends that I've known for years through the swap meets and through the cars and what have you. So it was a good time. Yeah. Okay,
Wow.
folks, we want to continue as we examine Doug Wilson's critique and attack on preterism. And we've been focused over the last couple of videos on the concept of the gathering. Uh, this is the eschatological gathering that is associated in Scripture with the parousia, that is, the second coming of Christ, the time of the new creation. And so we've been pointing out that this is an intensely eschatological concept focused on this one word and its cognates, and that word is episynagoge. And Mike's done some study on it. I've been studying this word literally for years. I'm constantly fascinated and just intrigued by the depth of associations linked to this word episynagoge. Um, Episynagoge is a compound word, epi upon, synagogue gathering. So it's a gathering together is the way it's very often translated, particularly in the New Testament. Matthew 23:37, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that kills the prophets, how often I would gather you together." That's episynagoge, as a mother hen gathers her chicks. So that compound kind of emphasizes the concept of the gathering. Now, there are a few places I want to be right up front about this for intellectual integrity. There are a couple of places, and I believe one of them is in Mark, in which the word episynagoge is not eschatological. But in so many, especially Old Testament prophecies, New Testament prophecies, episynagoge is a reference to the eschatological, the last days gathering of God taking Old Covenant Israel and the remnant of Old Covenant Israel, bringing them into the kingdom and casting out the body of Old Covenant Israel. And so it's a very, very powerful, very important word. And I thought we'd begin tonight at a passage we touched on ever so briefly, Mike, and that's Isaiah 27:13.
Yes.
And folks, in order to really appreciate this, and I was really thrilled. Zach called me from Arkansas or texted me the other day and asked me what he'd like for my subjects to be for the upcoming lectureship next year. And I said, well, you can assign me something. I'll be glad to do that. And he said, well, how about Isaiah 24-27? Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yes.
Yeah. And I said, oh, yeah. Preston loves the little apocalypse.
Yeah.
So that's why I'll be developing 2 lessons for that lectureship next year on that. But all of that said, and I'm just going to make some preliminary comments and have Mike kind of give us an overview of Isaiah 24-27. But I'll give a few thoughts initially. Isaiah 24-27 is called the little apocalypse by most scholars, really. And the reason for that is here in Isaiah 24-27, you have all of these statements. You have resurrection, you have messianic banquet, you have destruction of heaven and earth, etc. And I won't go into any more detail. But the only thing that I want to point out at this point before turning it over to Mike is how often the New Testament writers, including Jesus, they quote, they cite, they allude to, they echo Isaiah passages from Isaiah 24-27 in their predictions of the last days of the old covenant age, the time of the coming of the Lord, the coming of the resurrection. So that's what I'll throw in there, Mike. Take off and give us an overview of these chapters.
Sure. Well, Isaiah 24, it's very interesting that you have decreation here as a result of what? Israel, verse 5. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. It's because Israel has broken Torah. She's going to be cursed. And we have the decreation of the earth, and it's connected with the city that is wasted and broken down, verse 10. So again, you have the destruction of Jerusalem because of the breaking of Torah, results in decreation. Decreation as well in verse 29. Then the moon will be confounded and the sun ashamed, for the Lord of hosts reigns on Mount Zion. Then chapter 25. Again, the fortified city is in a heap. Keep going down. Again, our favorite passages, verses 6-9. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all the peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined, and he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The Lord God will wipe away tears. Verse 9, it will be said in that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he has saved us. Okay, so destruction of Jerusalem, again connected to the wedding feast, the eschatological wedding that is connected to the swallowing up of death. And then Jesus teaches this in Matthew 22. He connects the eschatological wedding when the city is burned, and every commentator says that's AD 70.
Yeah.
They're just not making the connections here. But this is the time of the resurrection when Israel violates Torah. But that doesn't fit the futurist paradigm. The amillennial says, oh, well, all the law was fulfilled at the cross. Some postmillennials like Gentry say all the Old Testament was fulfilled by AD 70, which I think he's probably recanted or tried to correct that to some degree, I'm sure. And then Isaiah 26, we continue. Let's see here. Again, the resurrection. Don and I went over this. You have Old Covenant Israel bearing forth wind. She could not produce salvation for the Gentiles, but it's the remnant that gives birth in a day, Isaiah 66. You can't separate birth from resurrection. The two are the same sides of the same coin. And then chapter 27, in that day, we have the destruction of Leviathan, the serpent, the dragon. All right. New Testament, Paul says that God was going to crush Satan under the Romans' feet shortly. Direct reference to Genesis 3:15. So you have all of these motifs, and chapter 27 is rich, and this is kind of where we're going to hunker down for a little bit. Look at verse 6. In the days to come, Jacob shall take root, Israel shall blossom and put forth her shoots, and fill the whole world with fruit. I go immediately to Colossians 1, chapter 6.
Yep.
Because this is where it says that the gospel had been preached in all the world, and it was bearing forth fruit in the believers throughout the Roman Empire, throughout the world. And so you have that fulfilled as well. See, verse 9, again, when they make the stones of the altars like chalk stones crushed in pieces, talks about the fortified city, Jerusalem. Again, this is a destruction, a judgment upon Jerusalem that produces the judgment of Satan and the resurrection again. Verse 12. And at that point, I will let you take it away. This eschatological gathering.
I will remember, look, this has been 35, 40 years ago when I started seeing scholarly references to the little apocalypse. And being raised in the environment that I was like, what in the world is the little apocalypse? What are they talking about? And I guess this is probably almost 45 years ago. And when I just sat down and read Isaiah 24 through 27, and then I'll be really honest with you, it bleeds over into chapter 28 and 29 because there's some references there, especially in chapter 28, that are just absolutely incredible.
Well, real quick.
Yeah.
Paul cites Isaiah 28 and 1 Corinthians 14. All right. With the tongues being for judgment, a sign for the Gentiles for judgment.
Yes.
Which is connected to chapter 13, seeing God face to face, which we talked about in Isaiah 52, verse 8. So you have that being raised, seeing God face to face during a judgment of Isaiah 28.
Absolutely. And you got Jesus referring to Isaiah 28:16, the laying of the foundation stone, the tried stone, the precious cornerstone. You got Jesus alluding to that in Matthew chapter 21. You've got Peter alluding directly to it, citing it. You got Paul alluding to it. I mean, so while scholars generally define the little apocalypse as 24 to 27, when you look at how the New Testament cites chapter 28, and there's even a few texts in Isaiah chapter 29 that the New Testament writers allude to. This people draws near to me with their mouths, but their heart is far from me. Well, that's Isaiah 27 or 29. So this is an incredibly rich context. Let me touch just on a couple of things that you brought out there that I think need to be fleshed just a little bit more. And that's where you started. Folks, let me ask everyone who will watch this. I want you to ask yourself the question: does your church, does your denomination, does your pastor teach a yet future destruction of material creation as a result of Old Covenant Israel disobeying Torah? Mike's chuckling over there because he knows the answer to that. No, there is no denomination, there is no eschatological paradigm out there, at least that we're familiar with. I said on one occasion when I went through chapter 24 with an audience where I was giving a lecture, I said, now, as sure as I say that no one teaches this, somebody will come up and say, oh, well, yeah, I bet, yeah, that's what this is teaching. Yeah. Since, after all, Israel remains God's chosen people. Well, if Israel remains God's chosen people, then the covenant must remain valid. Therefore, yeah.
Yeah, a mess.
Yeah, a true mess. But here's the point. As Mike read, the very reason for the destruction that is defined in Isaiah chapter 24, 1-5, the earth is clean dissolved. Earth is broken down. I mean, this is a time-ending bit of language, but it's all positive. The distinct and the direct reason for this destruction is they have violated the everlasting covenant. Now, Hosea is a parallel book. Hosea, it's either chapter 8 or chapter 9. I just had a brain burp fly right out. But it's either chapter 8 or chapter 9 in a absolutely parallel context, specifically says that it was the Torah that they had violated. And, you know, Mike, some commentators like to say, well, the everlasting covenant there, that's the Noahic covenant. Well, the Noahic covenant was a unilateral covenant between Yahweh and earth. It was, you know, it was not a two-way covenant. God didn't say, well, if man will keep my laws, then I'll do this and that, and I won't bring destruction again. No, no, no. This is God said, I'm going to put my rainbow in the sky. And as James Jordan pointed out many years ago, this is a bow turned upside down. God's said, I'm at peace here. No more judgment like this. So the point being, you can't say that man violated the Noahic covenant. Man couldn't violate that covenant because that's simply something that God said, this is what I vow. This is my promise. And I've even had people try to say, oh, well, that's the gospel. Well, that's really weird because he's talking to and about Old Covenant Israel in Isaiah chapter 24. So you have to do a whole lot of projection and protraction and all this kind of stuff like that. The bottom line is, again, with Hosea defining the law that they had violated, this is Old Covenant Israel. So the question once again becomes, does your church, does your pastor, do you know anybody that teaches the destruction of literal physical heaven and earth because Israel will one day violate the Old Covenant? And again, the answer to that is no. Nobody teaches that, folks. Okay, so if nobody teaches the yet future destruction of material creation as a result of Israel violating the covenant, then all of a sudden we're forced to the view this is metaphoric, hyperbolic, apocalyptic language. This is setting the tone for and actually carrying on with the tone that's set in chapter 19 about God coming on the clouds, and none of which is literal. So that sets the tone of our understanding of what's going on. And very quickly, let me make just another couple of points in confirmation of what Mike has already pointed out. This is the destruction of Israel for violating Torah. It's the city of confusion. And Isaiah 29 specifically calls Jerusalem the city of confusion. And it's the city that dwells in the midst of the land. Well, Ezekiel 5, 8, and 9 says Jerusalem was the city that was set in the midst of the land. So every marker that we have in Isaiah 24 points us directly to Old Covenant Israel being the focus here of this condemnation, of this coming judgment. And it's not just a city, it is the city inhabited by the people. Well, I wonder who Israel would think about, you know, when you're always talking about the judgment of the city set in the midst of the land and the people. They're not talking about anybody at all except themselves. They're not understanding anyone else except themselves. And I think that's critical for understanding the rest of these contexts that you've already pointed out.
It's everywhere. Every constituent element, the new heavens and new earth, Isaiah 65:66, the destruction of old covenant Israel, that people, before he creates a new people in the new creation, the church. Here in the little apocalypse, violation of Torah, judgment of the city is the time of the resurrection. Daniel 12, this 3.5 years when the power of the holy people is completely shattered, that's when all these things are fulfilled. The tribulation, the end of what? The end of the old covenant age, and the resurrection. It's always connected. Then you go into the New Testament and Jesus connects it. Once we get into the Olivet Discourse here in a minute, a gathering, we're going to see all these parallels again. He's constantly connecting the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 with all of these events. And that's why, and I'm just real quickly, listen to William's debate with Sam. And man, when he pressed him on the city in Revelation 18 and Revelation 11, Sam folded like a cheap suit. I mean, it's just, oh, it's any city in every city.
Yeah.
No, when the city, Old Covenant Jerusalem, is judged, just like we have here in the Old Testament, Scripture interprets Scripture, that's when the judgment of the dead takes place. That's when the resurrection of the dead takes place. And it's just so sad to watch. And then he says, I don't have any bias. I'm not,
I was
I'm
blown away by
free.
that.
I'm free from defending any system. And it's just like, dude, your bias against the time text are clear, even to partial preterists.
Oh, yeah.
Your denial of, seemingly denial of any kind of spiritual death is also a big tell to a lot of Reformed theologians. And this, and your denial of the great city in Revelation is again another tell to partial preterism that you do have a serious bias, serious
yeah.
one.
I just about fell over when he said he didn't have any bias.
I know.
His entire worldview is totally biased. And another thing, and by the way, let me make this announcement. On Tuesday night on Two Guys in a Bible, William Bell will be back on, and he will be on with me to discuss the debate. So I want everyone who is viewing this program to be sure to tune in to Two Guys in a Bible on fulfilled.com, and that program will be aired. And so William and I talked an awful lot about that debate, and everyone will need to watch the debate, and that will help you be prepared. And you can just go to Facebook or go to YouTube and look up William Bell versus Sam Frost, and you'll find the debate posted there. It's also on standingfortruth.com. I think that's the name of it, isn't it, Mike?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it's out there. It's easy to find. So do that, and then be sure to tune in to watch William and me discuss that debate. Sam responded to one person as Sam posted a little thing on Facebook this morning, and one person posted, well, Sam, I kept waiting for you to make a Bible argument, and you never made one.
Exactly. And that's what, in his debate with you, in that one that had all the commercials that drove everybody crazy, literally, guys, I'm not joking. Literally, there was not one exegetical argument made from Sam's.
That's right.
Not one. I mean, listen to it. And I was just floored. It's just all of these scare tactics. That's all he has. And he repeats himself all of the time. And it's the same scare tactics. It's
so we'll be discussing a lot of that. Okay, back here to Isaiah chapter 27, because I want to get to the very last couple of verses of Isaiah chapter 27 to talk about the episeudagogy. So what do we have in chapter 25? As Mike's already pointed out, resurrection, destruction of Jerusalem, Isaiah 25, 1-3, resurrection, messianic banquet, verses 6-8. Chapter 26, 10 and following, 19 and following. We have, Mike, you're like me. I like nails. nails in the wall. I can hang my hat on that right there. Well, guess what, folks? In Isaiah chapter 26, 19 to 21, we have a nail. The earth will no more conceal its blood, but at the coming of the Lord, the earth will reveal its blood. And by the way, folks, if you have access to an article by Meredith Klein on Isaiah chapter 24 through 27, boy, if you don't have it, you need it. He's not a preterist by any stretch of the imagination, but his exegesis of these chapters makes you say, "Come on, you're on the right path. Come on, come on." He does some marvelous grammatical, linguistic, and exegetical work. I have referred to his article many times in my research. So here's the point: in all these descriptions of death and destruction and warfare, destruction of Jerusalem and what have you, in Isaiah chapter 26, 19 to 21, we have the Lord coming out of heaven and walking on the mountains to avenge the blood of the martyrs. Well, I think Jesus had something pretty definitive to say about the time of his coming to avenge the blood of the martyrs.
Well, Isaiah 2 and 3, or actually Isaiah 2 through 5.
Yeah.
Same concept, the day of the Lord with the sword, again, avenging the martyrs' blood.
Yep. That's exactly right. This theme just permeates the entire context. So in that day, now look, folks, chapter 27, verse 1. In that day, well, in what day? The coming of the Lord out of heaven to avenge the blood of the martyrs. Leviathan, that great serpent, will be destroyed. Whoa. So if you follow the theme of the avenging of the blood of the martyrs,
Revelation 20, right?
Revelation chapter 20, the destruction of Leviathan is at the end of the martyrs. I had somebody tell me just recently on YouTube, the Old Testament does not predict the millennium. And I said, really? I said, well, it may not use the term 1,000 years. It may not use the term millennium, but guess what it does do? It predicts the destruction of Leviathan. When does that occur? And of course, they never answered. They disappeared from that discussion. But here's the point. As Mike so well stated a few moments ago, throughout these chapters, we have the intermingling of two concepts. We have the concept of judgment. We have the concept of salvation. And it's not an antithesis. I mean, obviously, there's a difference between salvation and destruction, but it is not like, well, okay, we're going to talk about salvation. That's something totally isolated and divorced from the time of the judgment. No. These are the synchronous events, same time events. So we come to
the two Jerusalems, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. When one Jerusalem is destroyed, it's the salvation of Jerusalem, and that's kind of caused some disconnect in some theologians. But when you understand it, it really opens up Scripture.
No doubt whatsoever. There was a famous German theologian, and I apologize, I've forgotten where he said it. I had actually given a reference in one of my books to his citation in one of his works, but his name is Hengstenberg, very, very famous German theologian. And I think it was Gary DeMar contacted me and said, I can't find that quote in his book. And I'm going, oh no, did I have it from a different book and I miscited? I know that I got the quotation right. I know that I got what he said correct. He was commenting on Zechariah chapter 14, but he expanded it wider than Zechariah. In Zechariah 14, you have the destruction of the earthly Jerusalem, but the creation and the exaltation of the heavenly Jerusalem. That was Hengstenberg. I think he was in the mid 18th century, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps the 19th century. But the point of it is, scholars have noted there's a two Jerusalem doctrine in the Old Testament. It is one Jerusalem, the earthly Jerusalem destroyed, the heavenly Jerusalem established and exalted.
The remnant.
The remnant, exactly right. So here in chapter 27, we'll start drawing this down to where we want to go for our study of the gathering. that is the episynagoge. It's really, really critical. And I'm just going to read it because I sometimes get the language confused because of, has he done this? Okay, Isaiah 27, verse 7, has he, that is Yahweh, struck Israel as he struck those who struck him? There's a whole lot of striking going on here. You just got to follow it carefully. Or has he, that is Israel, been slain according to the slaughter of those who were slain by him? Now, here's something you have to see, folks. Israel is being depicted as slain corporately.
In the dust.
In the dust. Bingo. Back to chapter 26. Rejoice, those of you who are in the dust. And Daniel chapter 12. Those who are in the dust of the earth shall arise. You know, Steve Gregg in his book, When Up Full Preterism, says the only thing that's in the dust is physical bodies. Well, not according to the Bible. That's just absolutely not correct. Here he is talking about Israel, the corporate body of Israel in the dust. And by the way, back in chapter 25, notice, I think, what is verse 12? Let me look here. Oh, yeah. The fortress of the high fort of your walls, he will bring down, lay low, and bring to the ground down to the dust. It's an image for destruction. You know, image for destruction. Israel was defeated. She was in the dust because she had taken captive. Okay. Bondage, alienation. So now then, notice back to Isaiah 27, verse 8, in measure. So he asks, has Israel been slain? Yes. Now he says, in measure. By sending it away, you contended with it. He removes it by his rough wind in the day of the east wind. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, you have to see that God, or Isaiah, is being asked the question or posing the question to Yahweh, has Israel been slain? Well, yeah, in measure. Well, you know, if you talk about individuals, you don't kill somebody in measure. You know, are you about half dead here? You know, but this is corporate Israel being slain, just like Ezekiel 37 pictures the whole house of Israel in their graves, in bondage, in captivity, dead in sin. This, ladies and gentlemen, as we have hinted at before, this is good typical Hebraic thought. Hebraic thought is corporate, not of individual. I'm not denying that individuals are addressed. I'm not denying that individuals have a part in the corporate. That's not being suggested. What is being suggested is that the focus is on the corporate. According to Hebraic thought, men and women found their identity not within themselves, but in the body of the nation as the people of God. And any number of scholars, modern scholars, non-preterists, recognize this concept.
Tom Holland was one of the first that I read that was a non-preterist that just nailed it.
There's a scholar by the name of Buchanan. I have his work in my library. He is not the easiest reading scholar, but he is magnificent in developing the corporate concept of Israel. And he said the Western concept of emphasizing the individual. And by the way, Scott McKnight, I think it was, who said the modern day view of evangelism focused on the individual, almost to the exclusion of corporate, is a thoroughly non-Hebraic concept.
It's a Western, yes.
It's a Western concept. Exactly right. Okay, I want to get right to this right here. So Israel was slain. Now watch. The Lord says again in verse 8, he, that's Yahweh, removes it by his rough wind in the day of the east wind. Now watch this, folks. Therefore, by what? The sending of Israel away, the killing of Israel. By this, the iniquity of Jacob will be covered, This is all the fruit of taking away his sin when he, that's Yahweh, makes all the stones of the altar like chalk stones that are beaten to dust. Wooden images and incense altars shall not stand. Yet the fortified city will be desolate, the habitation forsaken, left like a wilderness. There the calf will feed, and there it will lie down, consume its branches. When its boughs are withered, they will be broken off. My glasses are too weak tonight. The women come and set them on fire. It's a people of no understanding. Therefore, the one who made them will not have mercy on them. The one who formed them will show them no favor. Folks, if we cannot see and acknowledge this is corporate language, first of all, but it's the time of judgment on corporate Israel. Now, here's something that we absolutely have to see before we get to verse 13. Paul in Romans chapter 11, 26 and 27.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I know you would be. Paul says, all Israel shall be saved, as it is written. The Redeemer shall come out of Zion, for this is my covenant with them when I take away their sin. I do not know of a single scholar that develops the relationship between the old covenant and the new covenant that denies that Paul was drawing directly on Isaiah chapter 27 in Romans chapter 11. Well, that means Paul in Romans chapter 11 was anticipating the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 27. Now, that means Paul was expecting the salvation of Israel. The all Israel is the righteous remnant of Israel, folks. It's not every single individual in the corporate body.
With the believing Gentiles.
Exactly. And so when Paul is quoting Isaiah 27 in Romans chapter 11, he was expecting that salvation to take place when? Oh, when the fortified city would be desolate, when the altar would be turned to chalk stone. Oh, and get this. Here's the reason why. This is a people of no understanding. Folks, this is a direct citation of Deuteronomy 32, verse 28. Deuteronomy 32, 28, 3 times in Deuteronomy 32, we're told this is the song of Moses. And actually, if you go back to 31, 29 through 31, it's about the last days. So you have 4 references here. Last days, Deuteronomy 32, verse 5, this is for many generations to come. Your children will ask you, you explain this after many generations to come. Deuteronomy 32, 19 to 21. Oh, that they were wise. Oh, that they would understand what their last end will be. Deuteronomy 32, 29 to 31. Oh, that they were wise. Oh, that they would know what their last end will be. 4 times we're told the Song of Moses is about Israel's last days. Folks, it's not about the end of time. Not about the end of the Christian age. It's about Israel's last days. So here is Isaiah 27 drawing directly on the Song of Moses to predict what was going to happen to Israel, thus in her last days. Well, how does that work out in Romans 11? Well, Paul in Romans chapter 11 is anticipating the fulfillment of Isaiah 27, but Isaiah 27 is about Israel's last days. You cannot put the fulfillment of Romans chapter 11, 26 and 27 at the end of the Christian age. The Christian age is not about Israel's last days. It is about the endless New Covenant age. The New Covenant age has no end.
Ephesians 3, 20, 21.
Exactly. Now, let me draw this down. This salvation of Israel of Romans 11 would fulfill Isaiah 27, which is drawing on Deuteronomy 32, which is about Israel's last days. That means that Romans 11, to reiterate, is about the fulfillment of Deuteronomy chapter 32 at the end of Israel's Old Covenant age. That completely eliminates the dispensational view. It completely eliminates the postmillennial view. It completely eliminates even the reformed amillennial view that there is a yet future conversion of Old Covenant Israel to be done. It's all about Israel's last days. And what's so interesting to me is you have so many futurists say, oh, well, yeah, Israel's last days were in the first century. Israel's last days were in AD 70. Okay, thank you. You just given Romans 11 right over to those of us who are preterists and who acknowledge these contexts. But here's what this also means. Notice this is where we were headed in all of this.
He comes out of Zion to do something.
Exactly right. The Redeemer shall come out of Zion to do what? To save Israel. Oh, and to judge Israel. Save the remnant, judge the corporate body. That's Isaiah 27. That's Deuteronomy 32. That's the time of the episynagoge. Isaiah 27, verse 13. So it shall be in, well, let me go back to verse 12. Mike already read it.
Real quick.
Yeah.
It's in Romans 11, he comes out of Zion to take away their sin, right? And that is where you were going, I think, with
absolutely
here in Isaiah 27, because it talks about the forgiveness of sin. I thought for the forgiveness of sin was at the cross.
Yeah.
No,
that's what everybody says.
It's at the consummation as well. The Hebrew, he's a high priest. The atonement process is not complete until the high priest comes out and sprinkles the congregation and declares that it is finished. So anyway.
Absolutely. Great point. And to go back to that, just to drive that home, therefore, by this, the iniquity of Jacob will be covered. This is the fruit of taking away his sin. Well, Sam and the futurist just hate time statements. They literally hate them and they mock them. If those of you who watch the debate, you'll notice, well, there goes William again. He's having to rely on the time statements. Oh, there's something wrong with taking the Bible at what it says. And that's
but then he says a child can understand the destruction of heaven and earth and resurrection.
Absolutely.
A child can't understand the time statement, Sam.
Right.
And you cannot connect real quick. You cannot always say that the time statements like Hoiksema, he's always near, in the sense that God is omniscient. He's omnipresent, rather. He's omnipresent. Therefore, he's always near. No, in Daniel, there are events, historical events that are connected to the time statements. Daniel is told these events, these historical events, are far off. Don't seal it up. John is told don't seal it up, Revelation 22:10, because all of these historical events are near. So you can't do it. Like he always cites all these Psalms where David is looking for deliverance and well, God is at hand because he's always near to David. No, but these are chronological nearness statements. They're either far off or they're near in time, in Israel's time, chronological time.
Great point. And I'll share a quick anecdote. Some years ago, I had a local minister who thought he had all the answers when in fact he had none. And he and I had conversed a good little bit, and he always left frustrated because he couldn't answer the biblical text. And one day he came into my office, nice guy, never got out of hand, never got ugly. But he came in, sat down, smiled, and he said, I got you, Preston. I said, okay, great. I said, what do you got? He said, you're always talking about the time statements. He said, at hand, quickly, shortly, et cetera, et cetera. But he said, I have discovered, he said, boy, I've been studying this hard. And I thought, you've just been trying to find an escape hatch is all you've been trying to do. So anyway, he said, all those words mean is Christ was certain to come. They had nothing to do with when he would come. I said, so I said, let me make this perfectly clear so that I can understand where you're coming from. The coming of the Lord is at hand. Has nothing to do when he was going to come. No, nothing whatsoever. I said, okay. the Lord is standing right at the door. Nothing to do with time, nothing to do with the end. I went over several times. He said, not one of those passages have anything to do with when the Lord was going to come. He said, not one of them. I said, okay, let me ask you a question then. If at hand, quickly, shortly, and soon means certain, what does not at hand mean? And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, back in Numbers chapter 24, 19 following, Balaam gave a prophecy of the coming of the Lord. And he said, I see him, but not near. I see him, but he is not at hand. So I said, according to your argument, that must mean I see him, but he's not real certain to come. Don't really know if he's coming or not. So I cited some other Old Testament passages, you know, these things for many days off. These things are not at hand from the book of Daniel. And I said, so you're telling me that the prophets are being told the Lord is coming. Well, he may not be coming because it's not certain. And he literally slammed his Bible closed and he goes, well, you just got an answer for everything, don't you?
Been doing this for many, many years. Here's another one. Let's see. There's a passage in Revelation. Let me see if I could find it here. Where he's Revelation 22:20. Surely, there's your certainly, I am coming quickly. So that would be very redundant if it meant surely or certainly I am coming certainly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there are Greek words, folks, for certainly, and there are Greek words for imminence. And
that's right. Okay, got to bring this down here. Apologize. I knew this would probably happen. Okay, Isaiah 27. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will thresh from the channel of the river to the brook of Egypt, and you will be gathered one by one. Now, this is not episynagogue, this is synagogue, if I remember correctly. But verse 13, so it shall be in that day. What day? The day of the gathering. Now, who's he gathering, ladies and gentlemen? The dispersed of back in verse 9 and following that we've already read, those who had been scattered into the nations, those who were dead. Has the Lord slain him? Yes, he has in measure. So and the Lord, go ahead.
Quick, this is also the eschatological harvest. Thresh out the grain. What did John the Baptist say? He says his winnowing fork is already in his hand. And that tool was the end part of the harvest of the end of the age.
Absolutely. That's where I was going next, but thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, absolutely. You know to jump in at any time. Okay, so it should be in that day that the great trumpet will be blown. They will come who are about to perish in the land of Israel, they who are outcasts in the land of Egypt, and shall worship the Lord in the holy mount at Zion. Wow.
John, I think of John 4 there. The woman.
Oh, me too.
There's an hour coming, and now is. And she says, well, you know, where are we supposed to worship? What mountain? What city? And he says, there's coming an hour when you won't, it's not going to be here. You're going to be worshiping in spirit and in truth. It's a spiritual Jerusalem. It's a spiritual mountain.
Just as we pointed out a couple of weeks ago, Hebrews chapter 12, you have come to Mount Zion. I continue to say Hebrews chapter 12, 21 and following is to me really one of the most stunningly powerful passages when we understand the significance of Zion in the Old Testament. When we understand that in Zion is every eschatological element you could possibly think of. Right here, it's resurrection. And so you have the harvest. And by the way, it is episynagogue in verse 12. Excuse me for that. But the point of fact is, this is the great gathering. Now, we've only got about 10 minutes left. So let's really, really, really drive this home. Remember, folks, as Mike pointed out so well a few moments ago, as I pointed out, Israel is being depicted as dead, covenantally dead, scattered abroad, And as Ezekiel points out, scattered abroad out of the land, they're in their graves. They are dead. But now we've got the promise. And remember, we've already been told by Isaiah that the coming destruction, the scattering, the killing, the slaying, is because there are people of no understanding, fulfilling Deuteronomy 32:28. So this puts this entire context in the context of Israel's last days. That means the scattering has to be viewed in that same identical context of Israel's last days. But the Lord made the promise of the harvest, the threshing, at the end of the age. Matthew chapter 13. Harvest is at the end of the age. Is this not the harvest of Isaiah 27? Well, where are you going to change the subject? But look at when that resurrection harvest would take place, at the sounding of the great trumpet. Now, some years ago, I did a study. I went through every commentator I could find. Every one of them was in basic agreement that Matthew chapter 24, 29 to 31, 31 especially, is drawing directly on Isaiah 27, 12, and 13. Gregory Beale and his...
Which the Jews understood as a resurrection text.
Absolutely. I've got many, many citations from ancient rabbis. What they call the Rabbi. Well, I forgot the main nickname that they call him. 11th century rabbi, Jewish rabbi, who is considered today still to be the most famous of all of the Jewish rabbis. Like, one of his names was Rashi.
Rashi?
Yeah. Rashi, yes. He says this is resurrection right here, the blowing of the great trumpet. Folks, this is also the fulfillment of Sukkot. So you have, as Mike pointed out so well a moment ago, this is the harvest. Well, what's the Feast of Harvest? Sukkot. This is the ultimate fulfillment of Sukkot. This is the dead. That's how the Jews understood this text. Okay, so Doug Wilson applies Matthew 24, 29 to 31 to what event, Mike?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Doug Wilson applies Matthew 24, 29 to 31 to what event?
AD 70.
Whoa. Whoa. I think I see a train coming.
Yeah, there's a huge train coming, and he tries to get out of this by saying that the eschatological gathering of the elect is a post AD 70 preaching of the gospel. The angels are just, new covenant believers preaching the gospel. But Jesus has already told us what the end of the age gathering is in Matthew 13, and it is the resurrection of Daniel 12, 2 and 3. So we already know what it is, number one. Number two, like Don said, and I've said, any Jew understood the gathering as resurrection. The scattering is death and darkness. The gathering is light, righteousness, and resurrection in the land. And, I'm also thinking about William's comment in the debate on John 4 and the harvest there. Now, he is gathering. Who are these people? It's a Samaritan, right? and this is what our text is talking about. He's gathering from all of these areas back, but not into the land, in Messiah, where there's eternal life and there's resurrection life.
Great points. And we can bring in here, because you just touched on it, that this is a spiritual gathering. This is not a gathering into the physical land. Matthew chapter 23, 37, a passage I cited a few moments ago. Jesus standing in the temple, the very epicenter of Jewish thought, Jewish life, as some commentators have said, The temple at Jerusalem was the very heartthrob of the nation of Israel. So here's Jesus standing in the temple, and he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that kills the prophets and stones those who were sent unto thee, how often I would have gathered you together." Epi synagogue, the very word used by Isaiah 27:12. I would have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not. Behold, your house is left to you desolate. So here Jesus said, and by the way, I should bring in at this point John chapter 11. But before I do that, I'll make this observation. Jesus said, I wanted to gather you under my wings. I wanted to gather Israel under my wings. Mike, have you ever heard anyone suggest that Jesus was speaking of that in literal geographical terms?
No, it's not an exact parallel, just like Acts 1:11.
Yeah, exactly. Folks, we're not talking, Jesus was not talking at all about saying, I want everybody to go out to Samaria, Jerusalem, Samaria, Judah, Samaria, uttermost parts of the world. I want you all bring them back to the literal Jerusalem. I'll be waiting right here for you. He was wanting to gather them into a covenantal, face-to-face relationship with him. Just like
I see Jerusalem as the Pharisees in that passage where he pronounces the seven woes. Jerusalem is the Pharisees. The gathering of the children are those who are listening to Jesus, and they're trying to hinder the eschatological the gathering of the preaching of the gospel, obviously. But in doing that, they're trying to hinder that eschatological gathering for the remnants. It's Jesus versus Jerusalem. It's Jesus versus the Pharisees. They're the ones that are trying to hinder this gathering for the children.
Good point. Good point. And then we go to John chapter 11 to buttress what we've just seen. John chapter 11. Here's, Caiaphas saying, it was necessary that one man perish for the nation. Jesus came to do what? To gather together the children of God scattered abroad. Well, I just want to make the point again, and this goes to the very heart and the very core of dispensationalism, for instance, which is talking about, the Jews got to go back to physical Jerusalem, to the Messiah. Well, Jesus wasn't talking about geographical Jerusalem in Matthew 23:37. He wasn't talking about a literal geographical gathering in John chapter 11, verse 51 and 52, verse 52 specifically. He was talking about that covenantal, relational gathering to him under his protective wings, to put it like that.
Yes. And it's interesting here. Look at the Greeks of the next chapter 12, verse 20. It's interesting. Now, among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks, Gentiles. So these came to Philip, who were from Bethsaida of Galilee, and asked him, they want to see Jesus. And then right after that, Jesus, it's weird. It's like the hour is now, it's time. He's going to gather the children scattered abroad
everywhere.
And there's a parallel to this passage in 1 John 2:2. He's not only the propitiation for our sins, I take that as Jews, but for the sins of the whole world, that is Gentiles as well. And he's gathering them. He's the propitiation for both groups.
I agree 100%. And it's just beautiful stuff. So here's the point, part of the point, and we're almost out of time. I was raised believing that Matthew chapter 24 didn't have anything in the world to do with the resurrection. When I saw the connection between Isaiah 27, 12, and 13, well, the whole context of Isaiah 24 to 27, that resurrection permeates these chapters. Isaiah 27, 12, and 13 is just the penultimate, as it were, the climax of this chapter, saying, okay, dead, scattered, the great trumpet is going to sound to gather together the elect from the four winds. Well, what did Jesus say? Matthew chapter 24, verse 31. The Son of Man will send forth his angels. They shall gather together the elect with the sound of the great trumpet. And once again, I mean, G.K. Bill, E. Earl Ellis, you name it, every commentator that I'm aware of, yeah.
Well, I want to interject real quick. Although Doug Wilson takes that gathering there as a post 8070 evangelism, James Jordan in this book right here, I highly encourage you to get it. He gives an exegesis of Matthew 23 through 25, and he now has changed his view. He takes that gathering as the resurrection of the old covenant dead ones out of Hades to inherit eternal life, just like he does Daniel 12, the resurrection there. So he's being consistent. He's trying to be consistent.
Yeah.
And Gary DeMar did the same thing in his debate with Michael Brown when that passage came up. So that's huge. That is a huge admission.
They're just moving right along.
Yeah. Yes.
I've got
that's
that.
something that Wilson has to deal with. This is his system. These guys are a part of his system, and
Correct.
he has to deal with it.
That's right. That's right. And that may be one of the reasons, Mike, that we're not hearing anything back from Doug Wilson or any of these other guys to meet you and me in a debate, because they know they're so often disagreeing with each other on these key eschatological passages.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if Doug could get, I mean, obviously he wants to get a partial preterist partner. I mean, get Steve Gregg. I mean, you're going through his book now. You've debated him, get Jeff Durbin, get James White, even though he hasn't really done anything. That's fine. We'll work with it somehow. But Matheson, Gentry, get one of these guys. Do your best.
Yeah.
And if you can't, and Wilson, if you can't get any of them and they're not willing to debate, you have to ask yourself, why?
Yep, exactly. Well, folks, we're out of time. We've got another hour under our belts here. Another good program in my estimation. Had a lot of fun. Mike, great to be with you as always, my brother and my friend.
Yes.
So I'm going to say good night. I'm going to go eat some supper.
Well, hey, if you guys need a third person on that panel to talk about that debate, I would love to. So, but I will be tuning in to what you and William have to say on that, because I think that'll be a great show.
All right, man. Good night.
All right, take care.
All right, here we go. Good night.
Good stuff. Take care, Don.
You bet.